I think you prefer a firmer hand.
A Firmer Hand is the title of the new album by Scottish musician Hamish Hawk. We spoke to Hamish on the eve of the album's release about the new places his songwriting is taking him. Here he is in his nephew's bedroom in West Yorkshire to tell us about his Kiwi connection.
Yeah, so my dad was born in New Zealand, and therefore through by sort of citizenship by descent, me and my siblings all have New Zealand passports. And I can confirm I am going to New Zealand for the first time in my life in April, next April. So I'm absolutely psyched, and I'll be flying into Auckland. So
A Firmer Hand. So, like I said, it's coming out imminently here in New Zealand, so it's very exciting. How are you feeling about? Because it's a step. It feels like a step forward in some respects from what you've been doing in the past.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm really excited about it. As you can probably imagine, because of I suppose, the sort of lyrical content of the record, I've been more, I wouldn't say anxious, but I've been thinking more about the release than maybe, or thinking differently about the release and what that means for me personally. I've been thinking more about that for this record than I had for previous ones. I would say it's by far and away the most lyrically revealing record, the most vulnerable making. And I made a point in the lyrics of essentially what I wanted to do was to be as barefaced and sort of honest as I could be. And so I think I have achieved that. I think it's the most sort of searingly honest record I've ever written. And I've said a few times that it really was a warts and all approach lyrically. I didn't want to hold anything back. And that's essentially why the record's called A Firmer Hand. It was essentially about putting my foot down and just sort of standing in my own life for the first time musically. And it really, you're right, in terms of it, I'm glad you say it's a step forward, because it certainly feels to us as a really important step.
So was it difficult? Was it scary? Do you feel like you stepped outside your comfort zone while writing these songs?
I mean, yeah, the thing is, it's for me personally, when I write, when I sit down to write, and I'm staring at either the sort of blinking cursor or the blank page, I don't really have any plans as to what a song might be. I try as best to, well, generally what happens is I tend to feel something happens in my mind and it says, right, you've probably got enough in there now to write something. What that is, what sort of shape or form that will take, there's no knowing. But something in my brain says you're ready. And then I sit down, and more often than not, by the time that either the half an hour is over or the 3 hours or the 2 months is over, I have very little, I realize I've had very little control or very little input, really direct input into what these songs sound like. And so with A Firmer Hand, it was interesting because there were maybe two songs that I wrote that ended up being the sort of first ones that I wrote for A Firmer Hand then. And they were of a certain tone and a certain color. And I thought, okay, right, well, those songs aren't necessarily going to sit easily next to songs like the ones on my previous records.
Right.
This is going to have to be some sort of departure. And as I say, as much as I had very little control over the content of the songs, really, they started to sort of bunch together. They started to sort of become sort of cohesive around a particular set of themes. And that was essentially this kind of, I would say, sort of a lust and eroticism and desire and the sort of violence of sex and things like that. That became the cloth from which all of the songs were cut. So yeah, I would say that more so when in the past I've dealt in romanticism, it's all that kind of like the jealousy of love and the thrill of the chase, all that stuff. This one was definitely more like, okay, right, well, okay, I'm gonna have to be talking about sex, which was a bit more confronting for me. But yeah, I am nervous about it, but I can tell it's the right thing to be doing for me. So yeah, I'm glad to be doing it.
And have you gotten any reaction from friends and family who have heard these songs already?
Well, so my family haven't heard it. I haven't played it. It's funny because in the past, I think I was maybe quicker to send songs to people and say, what do you think about this?
Right.
And I think with this, I was less, in a way, I was less interested. Fundamentally, no one's ever says quite what you want them to say, and they're
Right.
never going to, and there's no sense in looking for it,
Yeah.
if you know you're not going to get it. So I was less interested in that feedback before it came out. But now when it comes to release week, I'm really excited for what people will say about it. And the band and I are currently on tour doing this promotional tour for the record. And we've done 2 gigs so far, and we've got another 2 weeks worth of gigs, and then we go on tour after that. So yeah, this week's going to be interesting in terms
Wow.
of hearing what people think. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
So in some terms, I think you define or you call this album a group album as well. So you
Yeah,
write all the lyrics, but you
that's
have
right.
a team with you, Rod and
Yeah.
Andrew, and a group of. So tell me who those folks are and how they contribute to what we hear.
Yeah, so certainly. So in the past, I mean, when I was sort of in my early 20s, when I first started performing in earnest, I was performing pretty much exclusively as a solo performer. It was just me and a guitar,
Right.
and certainly writing, it was me and a guitar or me and a keyboard or whatever. And then I had there's a folk musician based in Scotland, a sort of alt folk musician called King Creosote, and he essentially
I think I've
mentored
heard
me.
of that. Yeah.
Oh, he's yeah,
Yes. Yep.
the best. Yes, he's excellent. But he essentially mentored me in my early years and helped me release my first record and things like that.
Ah.
And he suggested for a support gig for one of his gigs, he said, "Why don't you get a band together and sort of like beef up the sound a bit?" So I got a band together, and that for a while was essentially my singer-songwriter songs, but maybe a bit louder with a backing band. And yet, over the past few albums, Heavy Elevator, Angel Numbers, and now A Firmer Hand, the songwriting collaboration really took off. So it's been me writing all the sort of lyrics and vocal melodies. And then you have Andrew Pearson, my guitarist. He also sort of collaborating with him and him providing demos to me and me writing over the top of them. And then Stefan Maurice, my drummer, who's also a sort of multi-instrumentalist. He
Uh-huh.
um he's been writing a lot as well. So on the previous 2 records, Heavy Elevator and Angel Numbers, there were songs I'd written on the end of my bed with my guitar, in with band collaborative songs. And on this record, all the music was written by Andy and Stefan, and I just decided to focus purely on the lyric, which I think has served the album greatly. And yeah, once again, we're working with Rod Jones, producing it, and yeah, we've seen it as something of a trilogy, and I feel that even before the record's out now, we're all quite content in feeling that we've achieved something just by getting
Right.
it out.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And,
Yeah.
you mentioned your lyrics, that you're the lyric writer. My understanding is that you spend quite a bit of time on your lyrics. So
Yeah.
how do you know when you've got it? Or
Oh,
are you ever satisfied with it?
I spend a huge amount of time. You're absolutely right. I'm a really dedicated perfectionist. I'm never quite happy until I've had enough time to sufficiently sort of shave bits off and reconfigure other bits and take bits from little fragments that I've got sitting around and put them in and knock everything in that song against something else and see how it reacts. Yeah. Am I ever satisfied? It's a difficult question to answer. There are some songs I have in my repertoire that I can look at them and go, there's absolutely no word anywhere in that I would move
Right,
or
right.
that I
Oh, that's all right.
change,
Yeah.
would improve. But that is the exception to the rule. Most of them I'd go, yeah, well, that bit could be better. But this album was essentially an exercise in being slightly less fanciful, slightly less florid in my language, and being a bit more direct, and yeah, paring things back. And so sometimes in that, paring things back in terms of the structure of the lyric itself and the actual meter, that was an aim for me. But it was
Uh-huh.
also about not hiding behind any unnecessary artifice or unnecessary metaphors. It was just about being sort of more blunt. Um, and yeah, I think it's been successful in that. But sometimes that can be scary. For me, historically, the words in the past, the words have worked for me, and in this album, I definitely worked for the words, you know.
Oh, okay. Well, you have a tune called Machiavelli's Room, which I think is kind of the heart of the record that has been
Yeah,
described.
absolutely.
And I'll just throw one lyric back at you. All my dead guitars sing when he strums. So, I mean, when that's poetry rather than being blunt about, as you were
Yeah.
referring to before. So maybe you can tell me a little bit more about that song and that process
Yeah.
that did that one.
When I cradle him, yes, when I cradle him in my arms, curse the gathering storms, burn their uniforms if they do him harm. All my battle scars are healed by his charms. All my dead guitars sing when he strums, and in truth I barely notice now.
Well, that was one of the two songs that were essentially the beginnings of the record. And you're absolutely right. You know, I think the band and I would definitely agree with you and say that that is the heart of the record. The sort of yeah, it's one of the essential sort of struts of the record. You know, it's
Right.
holding it all. And it's something like the record in miniature. That was the first song where sort of lust and desire and sex really first reared its head. As I say, in the past, I dipped my toe into, well, gone for full submersion in romanticism, and
Right.
this was the first time where that kind of animalistic, lustful streak came out, and it was quite an affronting song for me to write. You know, it was quite I didn't know what that. The song essentially made great demands of me as a writer, and it demanded a certain kind of, if I can say so myself, a certain kind of either well, I don't know if I could say bravery, but a certain kind of I needed a bit more gumption just to like power through with that
I
song.
think bravery is a good word for it because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
takes some courage to put yourself out there like that. And it
yeah,
seems like you say, being a romantic writer, everybody's been done that. And
yeah.
but moving to where you've come on this record is completely different.
Oh well, thank you. I'm glad you say that. I mean, I take that as a compliment. Thank you. Um, but yeah, so it was that song. I'm exceptionally proud of that song. I think musically, it's a really interesting sort of turn for us, and it's got great promise for the future. That sound, and I loved writing it as well. I was absolutely consumed with writing it. For quite a long time, I would listen to the demo over and over again and just try and get it right. And you're right. It's I don't want to make out that I've gone for some sort of more pedestrian verse or just making it like quite plain. It's just more I'm not throwing in verbose couplets
Right.
just to reinforce the song in some way. I feel on this record I've allowed the songs to stand on their own 2 feet and stand up for themselves, you know.
Right, right, right. And me being the geek that I am, I love the name checking that you throw in you mentioned the Ramones, you Frankie Valli, Jacques Brel. I mean, is that
Yeah.
just fun for you to do that, or is
Oh
it?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
He said, death-wise, I wanna be cremated. I said, that sounds like something the Ramones. And then I hesitated, 'cause I can't think of anything but the sorry way that he's been looking at me. And the turquoise Thunderbird parked outside, sizing up Elizabeth Street.
People will often say, "Oh, you must absolutely love Frankie Valli, or you
Right,
must
right,
love Bones, or they must be heroes of yours."
right.
And that's definitely sometimes true, like
Sure.
especially when it comes to someone like the Ramones or Frankie Valli, like I do love Frankie Valli's voice, I love the Ramones. That goes without saying. But
Exactly.
they serve like yeah, they serve they serve a purpose in
Right.
the lyric, not only for the listener, but for me. When I talk about the Ramones, when in that song, when I mention the Ramones, I know what I'm saying. Like I know what I'm bringing to my own mind when I say the Ramones. It's it's just as much about their music, just as much about who they are, and their influence on modern music as it is about a particular time when I listened to one Ramones song with a friend in a particular place and I was this age
Yep.
and this conversation we had. So the Ramones happened to that's one of the most amazing things about making music is that you're actually a sort of character in someone's life in the same way that characters in television or in film are. People are you sort of welcome certain characters into your home when you play songs or when you watch TV or whatever. You're introducing those characters into your life. And so
Yep.
when I talk about the Ramones, I'm not just talking about the popular understanding of the Ramones. I'm talking about the character of the Ramones in my life.
Yep.
So it's so in that sense, it's I would hate anyone to think I'm just shoehorning them in for some
Right.
sort of credibility. It's more that I'm referring to essentially an emotional truth in my life. And that's certainly true of in Juliet as Epithet when I talk about the Ramones, that's absolutely true.
And of course, the great thing is you have your own vision and memories, and the Ramones mean
Yeah.
that to you, but
Yeah,
it's different for everybody. Like me,
exactly.
I'm 1,000 years older than you. I saw the Ramones and the CBGBs. So
Oh,
it
did you? Wow.
immediately brings me to blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure everyone who listens to it, when you say Frankie Valli, they have a different reaction to who they think he
Yeah.
is and what they mean to them. And
Yeah.
that makes them kind of bind with the song in a different way.
I would hope so. Yeah, I definitely hope that that's true because I think I've been a long believer in that you can never hope to appeal to everyone by being, some people tend to think or there seems to be some sort of popular wisdom that suggests that if you're very generic or general in your writing, that's going to appeal more widely
Right,
uh, than something idiosyncratic. And
right.
it's the opposite way. It's completely the flip. If
Yep.
you try to be as much yourself and as much as personal as you can be, those are the things that are going to travel the widest,
Yeah,
and
I think
appeal.
you're right. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. Now you have a couple of tunes near the end of the record, "Disingenuous" and "Milk and Ending." I
Yeah.
thought when I was listening to "Disingenuous," I was like, "Oh, this is all about songwriting." And then I think some notes that I got, "Milk and Ending" was mentioned as being about songwriting, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Did I miss something? What's going on?"
Oh,
But I
you're
mean,
absolutely right. Disingenuous is it's a song about songwriting. When you spend as much time, when you spend time thinking about songs as I do, or
yep,
as me and the band do, in the
yep,
same way that it tends to be that bands who have been on tour for a few years, suddenly all their songs are about being on tour.
right, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so, yes, you're exactly right. Disingenuous is a song about writing songs. But Milk and Ending is not a song about writing songs.
Okay,
No.
all right.
Yeah,
Uh,
song about yeah, that's a song about something quite different.
Yeah, and it has very dense production, that particular track. Can you tell me sonically what you were thinking of on
So
that one?
perfect. The distance between your finger and your ring. I feel you near. I fear you're near leaving. If Papa taught me anything, if Papa taught me anything, it was never to milk an ending. Yeah, well, I think sonically with Milk and Ending, what we were trying to do was essentially write a song that had two distinct sides to it in a way. It had this sort of duality where the verses have this kind of quite claustrophobic, quite I what's the word? Quite intense, sort of dark, brooding quality. And then as soon as you go into the chorus, it sort of lightens up and opens out,
Right,
and becomes perhaps a bit more plush.
right,
Um, that was the intention with that song. And so it does, I think, yeah, sometimes, yeah, claustrophobic is maybe the word for the verses. It feels like you're quite closed in.
right.
And then we were wanting everything to brighten and widen in the choruses. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I was thinking the Questionable Hit was about songwriting. That was how I got confused.
Well, that's I've you're very astute. Oh, it's the questionable
What should we put on the front of it? A homemade crucifix? Well, I'll say for definite they won't like it. I don't like it. This outfit's for a reboot. Be a good patch up the second-hand suit. I wish they'd dye his roots. If they think you're a fruit, the men won't want to be you.
There's a couple of records, a couple of songs that I've written before that essentially deal in the music industry as a romantic love interest.
Okay.
So that both into like sort of appealing to the music industry and also trying to essentially appeal to a potential new flame, you know.
Yep.
And so Questionable Hit continues to carry that mantle. There's a song on my last record called Think of Us Kissing. And this song is maybe a continuation in that sort of thing where at points you could think that I was talking to a lover or a friend, and then you could also imagine me talking to a label boss or a manager or something like that.
Yeah. And how do you deal with, what's the music business like for you over there? It seems to be changing by leaps and bounds everywhere differently, and everybody has to kind of adjust.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it does have its stresses and strains. I'm not going to shy away from that. I do consider myself, and I try to sort of stay in this mindset. I do consider myself very thankful and very lucky to have had the career that I have right now, which is an exceptionally close and friendly working relationship and loving working relationship with my band,
right?
A very understanding and supportive relationship with my management, and a new label, essentially, an independent label who seek not to assert any kind of sort of really hands-on creative control and have an immense trust in our sort of vision for ourselves. Now, as I say, the stresses and strains, there's just as many sort of financial difficulties and administrative difficulties that I'm sure you've heard a million times before, and anyone who knows anything about the arts sector at all understands the stresses that might bring. But on the whole, wherever the band and I could make choices about who we work with, the choices we've made so far have been absolutely the right ones.
Oh, good.
And so we're really lucky, and I feel very sort of blessed to have that, to be in that situation.
Right.
Because I know it's just not always the case.
Have you ever had someone kind of advise you to do things that you don't want to do?
Yeah, of course. And that's the crux of a song like Questionable Hit, you know.
Right.
It's the industry, after all, is an industry. And in the previous song I mentioned, Think of Us Kissing, the chorus is, the future is a factory and I foresee it hating me.
Right.
And there's definitely a lot of outside forces that seek to influence what you're doing, and the band and I are trying to keep ourselves as far away from that as possible.
Now, I wanted to ask you about your voice and your singing voice in particular. And to these ears, I can rattle off who you kind of sound like, which I'm sure you've heard before, like Scott Walker or Morrissey or Jarvis Cocker, people like that. But how do you deal with? Do you think about? Did other singers inspire you? Do you think about them, or do you strive to have your own voice? How do you?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's so tricky because it might sound ridiculous, but until very, very recently, and we're talking in the past year and a half, 2 years, I just never thought of myself as a singer at all.
Oh, really?
Okay. No, I sung my songs because I wanted to sing my songs, or someone needed to sing them. And when it comes to my words, maybe I'm a bit, I'm precious about them, so I want to sing them. or at least for the minute, I would love to try writing for someone else. I would love to try that, and see how that would affect my songwriting.
Right.
But my voice is it probably is some kind of mongrel, some sort of mongrel amalgamation of many of the songwriters and singers that I love.
Right.
And I've always been, since I was a kid, I've always been a bit of a mimic. I can do, I would say that I'm not too bad at impressions and accents, and
Right. Right.
I feel like I've got quite a linguistic brain. I speak German quite well, and sort of it's yeah, words and language have always just fascinated and inspired me, really.
Yeah.
So by extension, my voice, I think, just because of how long I've been singing, has just developed and become stronger as I've gone on. But no, I didn't. It wasn't a conscious thing at all. You could have fooled me into thinking that I couldn't really sing in the past,
Right.
and now it would be almost kind of foolish to believe that to be true. So I yes, it wasn't a conscious thing, but as I say, there's probably big crooning, baritoned, sort of barrel-chested singers that are the kinds that I tend to enjoy. But then again, I say that as soon as I say that, I can think of innumerable that don't have voices like that, whose voices I absolutely love. So
Right.
um, I love voices, and if mine is in any way original, then that's amazing to me. So
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of vocalists, they start out sounding like whoever they were, and they develop their own
yeah, you're
voice, if
exactly
you will,
yeah.
after a certain amount of time. If someone else were to, who would, I don't know, have you thought about who you'd like to hear sing one of your songs? Do you have a,
Oh, that's a really good question. Mm, you know what? I haven't really spent much time thinking about it. The thing is, talking about writing for someone else, I would love to try that. I
uh
do think I'd be interested to hear a cover of my work, because I do tend to think of it as so tied to me
Right.
personally,
Yeah.
that they are my life. And as I say, talking about, we were talking before about being generic or trying to appeal widely. My lyrics are quite wordy, and
Yep.
not everyone's that wordy, so and not that's, more power to them, I yeah, I would be interested to hear a voice, and I'd be interested to hear what song they might pick.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but no, you're going to have to leave it with me. I'll have to think
Okay.
about
All
some
right. We'll get back to you on that.
perfect candidates.
But you think about it, like Dylan and Cohen, they're very wordy and they got covered all over the
Absolutely.
place. So
That's true.
I
You're
guess,
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely
uh,
right. Well, I'm sure, I don't, yeah, we've had a couple of fans cover things. But really it's not been done much. So I would implore people to give it a go. I'm
all
I'm
right.
very interested.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see what happens there. So when
Yeah.
the record comes out tomorrow or whenever it is, what do you got planned for the day? Anything exciting?
Well, yeah, so we're playing gig. As I say, we're on tour.
Oh, right.
So
That's right.
we're going to be in Bristol here in
Right.
England tomorrow. And other than that, I'm afraid it's early nights and
Yeah.
early early starts for us on this tour. As I say, tonight we're playing in Manchester, which is, I mean, always an absolute blast whenever we play in Manchester. Just it's so steeped in sort of indie history, so
Yes,
it's
it is.
a great place to play, especially the night before the record comes out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got another sort of we've got a gig every day for the next 12 days or something. So in terms of yeah, like burning the candle at both ends, we've found out the hard way it's not that sustainable.
Fair
So
enough.
sadly enough, I mean that's the thing. We wish we could be Motorhead, but we're not.
There's only one
But
Maki, dag nabbit.
well, I know exactly. But yeah, so just a gig in Bristol tomorrow, and then yeah, the continuing gigs, and then at the end of that, yeah, maybe the celebration will hopefully come in September. We're
Okay.
all we're all taking some holiday and stuff. So
Excellent. And hopefully we'll
yeah.
see what you said. April, you might be down here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
indeed. As I said, well, maybe someone could twist my arm into a gig. I
Uh,
do have a passport after all.
that's
Um,
exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what we can do.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 13th Floor's Music Talk series, please be sure to subscribe to the website or to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. There's a whole lot more to discover.